You're reading this on a piece of glass. A thin, flat rectangle that fits in your pocket, connects you to every human being on the planet, and contains more information than every library ever built before the year 1900 combined. You didn't think about that this morning. You just picked it up. You probably checked it before you got out of bed. There's a good chance it's in your hand right now. And somewhere in the back of your mind, you already know what you're having for lunch, what the weather looks like outside, and what three people you've never met think about something that happened overnight on the other side of the world. Now take all of that away. No screen, no signal, no stored knowledge you can pull up in seconds. The rectangle in your hand is just a rock again. The world goes quiet in a way that would feel genuinely frightening if you'd grown up in it. Not peaceful quiet, not camping trip quiet, but the kind of quiet where the only information you have is what you can see, hear, and smell within a few hundred meters of where you're standing. That was the entire bandwidth of human existence for most of our species' time on this planet. No news from the next village, unless someone walked there and came back. No record of what your grandfather knew, unless he told you himself before he died. No map of where the river floods in spring, unless someone who remembered was still alive to warn you. You are the proof that people lived in that world. Every ancestor you have, stretching back through an unbroken chain of roughly 10,000 generations, figured out how to survive, find food, stay warm, find a partner, and raise children to adulthood without a single piece of technology that would look familiar to you today. They did it with their hands, their memory, and each other. And somehow, impossibly, one of them is you. So here's the real question. Not how did they survive? We know they survived. You're the evidence. The real question is, if you took one of them, someone genuinely smart, genuinely capable, a person who had mastered everything their world demanded of them, and dropped them into yours, what would actually happen? What would break their mind first? What would they understand immediately? What would they never understand at all? Because the answer is stranger than you think, and it says something uncomfortable about the world you've built. Let's be honest about what they were walking in with, not stupid. That's the first thing to get straight, because almost everything people assume about ancient humans is wrong in the same direction. A person born 10,000 years ago in the Fertile Crescent or 30,000 years ago on the steppe of Central Asia was not less intelligent than you. Their brain was the same size as yours, wired the same way, capable of exactly the same range of thought. The archaeologist David Lewis Williams spent decades studying the minds behind prehistoric cave paintings and concluded that the people making them had the same cognitive architecture as modern humans, the same capacity for abstraction, symbolism, and complex reasoning, the same brain, different software. But the software gap is enormous, and that's where the losing case really starts. They came in without writing. This sounds like a minor inconvenience, and it is not. Writing is not just a way to record things. Writing is how humans began to think beyond the limits of a single human brain. Without it, every piece of knowledge that exists lives in a person. When that person dies, the knowledge dies with them unless someone memorized it. The entire accumulated wisdom of a civilization is always one bad winter, one epidemic, one raid away from being completely erased. A person walking into your world from before writing was invented, which, depending on where they're from, could mean before 3000 BCE in Mesopotamia, before roughly 1200 BCE in China, and even later in most of the rest of the world. That person has never once seen their own thoughts made permanent. The idea that a mark on a surface could hold meaning across time and space, that you could communicate with someone who died 1,000 years ago, that a dead person could teach you something, that concept is not just foreign to them. It doesn't exist anywhere in their experience as a possibility. They came in without numbers, real numbers, not the ability to count. Humans have been counting for at least 40,000 years. We know this from notched bones found in the Congo, dated to around 20,000 BCE. But the mathematical infrastructure that your world runs on, silently in the background of everything. The engineering in the building you're sitting in right now required calculus. The phone in your hand required quantum mechanics to design. The food in your refrigerator got there via logistics systems running on algorithms. None of those things exist without a particular kind of abstract numerical thinking that took human civilization thousands of years of accumulated effort to develop, and that you absorbed so gradually growing up that you have no idea how completely it shapes everything you see. They came in without germ theory. This one is subtle, but it is devastating. A person from the ancient world watched people get sick and die constantly. They watched it in their children, their parents, their whole village. They explained it the only way available to them. Spirits, divine punishment, bad air, imbalance of humors. Those weren't stupid explanations. They were the best available explanations, given zero access to the information that would have made the real explanation possible. But the consequence is this: everything they believe about why things go wrong is false. Every instinct they have about how to respond to disease, contamination, or infection will make things worse. Not a little worse, catastrophically worse. A person from 5,000 years ago watching a child run a fever would do things to that child that would accelerate the child's death and do them with complete confidence and genuine love because they could not know what they didn't know, and they came in with a sensory world, calibrated entirely to danger and pattern in the physical environment. Every piece of their attention, every fast twitch reflex, every threat detection system their brain had developed and their culture had sharpened, all of it was tuned for a world of animals, weather, and other humans moving through physical space. Now put them on a street in any city on Earth. The sound levels alone in downtown Tokyo or midtown Manhattan would register as a sustained emergency. Research published in the journal Current Biology found that members of isolated indigenous communities have measurably higher sensitivity to low-frequency sounds and show stronger stress responses to urban soundscapes than people who grew up in cities. Now imagine not just a different baseline, but a completely different world. Cars moving at 60 miles an hour, lights that stay on after the sun goes down, voices coming out of boxes, people staring at small glowing rectangles and not looking up. Every single thing they see would be not just unfamiliar, but actively contradicting everything they know about how the world works. On paper, they shouldn't be able to function at all. But here's where it gets interesting. The first thing they would understand is fire. This sounds so obvious it's almost not worth saying, and that's exactly why it matters. A lighter, a gas stove, a furnace, any controlled fire would be immediately recognizable as the thing they already knew. Humans have been managing fire for at least 300,000 years. The relationship between humans and controlled combustion is so old it's practically biological. In a 2014 study of how indigenous children from fire-using communities interact with fire compared to children raised without it, researchers found that the fundamental cognitive recognition of fire as a tool, as something controlled rather than feared, appeared to transfer almost instantly across contexts with minimal instruction. Put a match in the hand of someone who has never seen a match, and if they come from a culture that uses fire, they will figure out what it does within seconds. One small flame. Everything that needs fire to work, cooking, heating, light, becomes at least partially comprehensible the moment they see that the fire is controlled and not a threat. The second thing they would understand is food. Not how it was made, not the refrigeration, not the packaging, not the agriculture behind it, but the food itself. Bread, meat, fruit, cooked vegetables. The sensory experience of calories that taste good is not culturally constructed. It is evolutionary. A person from 10,000 years ago would eat your food with more enthusiasm than you do because they would have never in their life eaten anything produced with 10,000 years of accumulated agricultural refinement. They would think you were insane for being bored by it, but they would eat it. They would understand it. And through food, through the fact of sitting and eating together, some of the first functional communication would happen without a single shared word. The third thing, and this one genuinely surprises people, is babies. Infants. A child under about 18 months, before language really locks in and before cultural frameworks fully calcify, would not frighten an ancient person. They'd recognize it immediately as a human infant that needed warmth and feeding and holding. Research by the anthropologist Sarah Blaffer Hrdy at UC Davis has shown that cooperative infant care, what she calls alloparenting, where people other than the biological mother share caring for a child, is one of the oldest and most consistent behaviors in human evolutionary history, going back potentially 2 million years. A small child is a point of genuine, uncomplicated recognition. No technology required, no shared language required. The ancient person would pick the baby up, and in that moment something would connect. The fourth thing they would eventually grasp is music. Not immediately. The instruments would be bewildering. The production would be overwhelming. The electronically amplified sound would be genuinely terrifying at first. But the underlying structure of music, rhythm, melody, the call and response patterns that show up in every human culture ever studied, those are not learned behaviors. They appear to be hardwired. A 2019 study from Harvard analyzing 315 songs across 60 societies found structural patterns that recurred regardless of culture or geographic isolation, beat, repetition, pattern. An ancient person might have no idea what a speaker is or how sound comes out of it. But if you played them something with a strong rhythmic pulse and waited long enough, you would almost certainly see them start to move, because the music itself is older than any of us. The fifth thing, and this is the one that would crack everything open, is pointing. Specifically, the gesture of one person pointing at something and another person looking where they pointed. This is called joint attention, and it is one of the foundational cognitive abilities that separates humans from other primates. Chimpanzees, despite their intelligence, do not naturally follow a point. Humans do it reflexively from the age of about 9 months. A person from any point in human history, no matter how different their world, shares this with you completely. And what that means practically is that you can show them things. You can point at the sky through a window and show them the sun is still in the same place it always was. You can point at food and nod. You can point at a sleeping person and mime sleep. The entire apparatus of human communication does not require language to begin. It requires only the willingness to direct another person's attention and the shared evolutionary history to follow it. Ancient people were extraordinarily good at this. Their survival depended on reading subtle cues in the environment, in animals, in other people. Their attention was sharp in ways yours probably is not. Here's the image everyone has: a caveman, grunting hunched, brow ridged forward, blinking in confusion at a smartphone, poking it with one finger like it's a small animal, maybe hitting it with a rock. The lights of the modern city reflected in eyes that don't understand. Helpless, lost, basically just an animal that can walk upright. That's not what would happen. What would actually happen is closer to this: an extremely alert, physically capable, socially sophisticated person who has spent their entire life reading environments, predicting behavior, and learning complex skills from observation would walk into your world and start cataloging it immediately, not understanding it, cataloging it. They would notice what moves and what doesn't. They would notice where other humans congregate and what draws them. They would watch how other people interact with objects before they touch them. These are survival skills, the same skills that let a hunter track prey across frozen ground for 8 hours, anticipating an animal's behavior from subtle signs in the snow. Those skills transfer directly to a new and chaotic environment. Here's the part that should make you feel something. A person from ancient times, your ancestor by blood, dropped into the middle of a modern city, would probably in the first few hours be more functional than you would be if the situation were reversed. Not because of superior intelligence, because of superior attention, because of a tolerance for uncertainty that you have completely lost. You, sitting in a forest in 30,000 BCE with no tools and no knowledge, would be dead within days, maybe hours, depending on the season. Genuinely, irreversibly dead. And you know it. You can't identify edible plants. You can't make fire from friction. You can't read the sky well enough to know what weather is coming. You can't track an animal, or skin it, or preserve the meat. You have almost none of the practical knowledge that kept every human being alive for the vast majority of human history, and you have never needed it. And you have never once panicked about this fact because you have been so completely insulated from the consequences of not knowing it that it has never felt like a gap at all. Meanwhile, you get stressed when your phone loads slowly. You get anxious when there's no Wi-Fi on a flight. You feel a low-grade social panic when a notification doesn't get a response for more than an hour. You eat food that tastes bad and complain about it while your ancient ancestor, who ate the same four things for their entire life and was grateful for every mouthful, would weep tears at the abundance and variety on any shelf of any supermarket in the world. You are warm right now. You have been warm for so long and so consistently that warmth has stopped feeling like a thing at all. It's just the background, the default, the nothing. They would be in awe of the nothing. Here's what the science actually shows. When researchers study the very few truly isolated communities that have had first contact with modern technology in the last 100 years, the Sentinelese of the Andaman Islands, various Amazonian communities, several groups in Papua New Guinea, the pattern is almost never confusion and helplessness. It is intense, focused, fearless observation followed by rapid functional learning. An anthropologist documenting first contact between a remote highland Papua New Guinea community and a camera in the 1930s described the initial response not as fear or bewilderment, but as immediate investigative interest. People touched it, moved around it, watched it. Within minutes, they had formed working hypotheses about what it was and how it behaved. Not correct hypotheses necessarily, but structured ones. That is not an animal encountering a foreign object. That is a scientist. The ancient mind was not primitive. It was differently loaded, it had different data, different frameworks, different reference points, but the processing power was identical. And in a world that changed as slowly as theirs did, the ability to learn a new thing from scratch, to watch, hypothesize, test, and adapt, was sharpened to an edge you probably cannot match in your area of unfamiliarity. You've spent your whole life having things explained to you labels, manuals, tutorials, onboarding flows. They spent their whole lives figuring things out from raw observation, with no instruction at all. Give a genuinely intelligent ancient person 3 days with a piece of technology they can manipulate safely, and the question is not whether they would learn something about it. The question is how much you underestimated them. We spent about 300,000 years building minds capable of surviving anything the physical world could throw at us. Then, in the last 10,000 years, a blink, an absolute nothing on the timeline, we built a layer of technology so thick and so complete that almost none of us need those minds anymore. The ancient person dropped into your world would be terrified, overwhelmed, and completely lost, but they would be looking for a way through. You dropped into theirs would just be gone. We didn't inherit the earth by being smarter than the world that made us. We inherited it by being adaptable and able enough to build a world that made us something new. And somewhere in the mind that lets you scroll, swipe, and tap your way through a life your ancestors couldn't have imagined. The original hardware is still in there, watching, learning, waiting to be needed again. It's just been a very long time since anyone asked it to do anything hard.